Hey everybody, this is Jessica, and today I'm going to be showing you how I created this art journal page using the supplies from the Mixed Media Inspired 2020 box. So in the box there is a bottle, this 1 ounce bottle of the Dina Weekly Media gel medium, and it's the exact same thing that comes in the larger 4 ounce jar. So I'm just spreading out my gel medium in an even layer, a medium thickness, just slightly larger than this lighthouse picture you can see here. And after I have that spread out nicely, I'm just going to place down my photo. And then I'm going to make sure that I'm pressing that completely down into the gel medium so that it's touching paper to paper surface. And so I'm just going in circular motions, and then I'm going to set this aside to dry. And while I'm waiting for that to dry, I'm just going to gesso the rest of my page. And I'm being careful not to get on the actual photo, so I'm just gessoing around the outside of it. And this is just in preparation for the next steps. And you can spread the gesso with whatever you want. I'm just using a brush, but you could also use a palette knife or an old scraper, whatever you have. So now that I've given this photo a chance to dry, and it's been about 2 hours, I'm coming back with my water bottle, and I'm going to spray the entirety of the photo with water. And I want there to be quite a bit of water there so it starts to soak into the paper, and you can see that the print starts to fade through a little bit, and I'm just removing all that extra paper with my finger. And you can see here that most of that paper has been removed. And now that I gave it some more time to dry, so it's been about 30 minutes since the last clip, I'm spraying more water, and I'm going back in and just removing all that extra paper. You can see the areas that are white or where I didn't quite remove all the paper pulp in the previous step. So I'm just gently going through and rubbing in a circular motion to remove that paper. And now I'm happy with it, so I'm going to go in with gel medium again and my Finnabar silicone brush, and I'm just going to very gently spread a layer of gel medium over the entire area of the photo. And this is the sealing step, so this is the final step. So be happy with it before you put the gel medium on. So I'm just using the silicone brush to spread it out so there's no extra glue anywhere. It's just a nice even coat, and it's nice and smooth. And then I'm going to let that dry. So now that my gel medium has had a chance to dry, I'm going to begin my collaging steps. So I'm using the coastal wood rice paper that was in the box and just some book paper that I had from previous projects. And I'm ripping this up in different pieces, and I'm ripping up more here than I actually end up using, but I wasn't exactly sure what I was going to do and how this was all going to collage, so I'm just prepping all my pieces. And then using gel medium, I'm going to put down all these pieces. So I'm spreading the gel medium with my silicone brush, but you could also just use a regular brush or a palette knife. But I like the silicone brush because it has a little bit of flexibility, but it also is easy to clean in the end. So I'm just laying these pieces of paper down. There's really no rhyme or reason to how I'm doing this. It's just I'm filling up the space. Some of it I'm overlapping it, some of it I'm not. You can see this larger piece here actually goes a little bit over the photo. I'm mostly just creating a backdrop for the colors that I'm going to add in the next step. And in the end, you won't see a lot of this book paper, but little bits will be peeking through. But the reason why I like to do this is because it gives me a little bit of a foundation as I start to create, and it takes away the white starkness of the page so that I feel like I'm just layering and layering and layering and creating depth. So as you can see here, all my pieces have been placed down, both the book paper and the rice paper. I'm just putting that final piece there to the left of the lighthouse. I have some of the pieces that are going off the page, and I have some that are overlapping onto the photo, and this is to create a cohesiveness throughout the page so it doesn't just look like I'm just gluing down pieces of paper without a purpose. So while I didn't think too hard about how I was going to place these down, I did place them down with purpose. So after the gel medium has had a chance to dry, I'm going to just go in with gesso and my brush again, and I'm just going over in different areas with a very light hand with the gesso to bring again some more cohesiveness between the collage pieces and the background so that there isn't just stark pieces of book paper, stark pieces of rice paper, and then a white background. So I'm using that gesso to soften it a little bit and blend it all together. So now I'm going to begin putting down paint. So the first color I'm laying down here is the Dina Wakley Media Umber. And then I'm going to use a stencil and a damp baby wipe. And I'm laying it on top of the wet paint, and then I'm rubbing through the stencil with my baby wipe to remove the design in the paint. So when I lift this stencil, you will see exactly the pattern of the stencil in the paint and then the dark paint around it where I brushed it on. And this technique is called reverse stenciling. And I'm going to be doing this exact same step up on the top of the page using umber again and the same stencil. Now I'm moving on to Ocean. And all the paints I'm using today are from the Dina Wakley Media line. So this is Ocean. And I'm using that same stencil again and the same technique. Now a couple things to note. If your baby wipe is too wet, you will have little bits of moisture bubbles when you lift your stencil. So you want to make sure your baby wipe is damp, not wet. And also, if you want to remove more paint, you just get a clean baby wipe and repeat these steps. If you want to do more of a tone on tone, like you can see here in the blue ocean paint, then just keep using a dirty baby wipe and it won't remove quite as much because it's dirty instead of a clean baby wipe. So you can get two different looks or effects with the same technique. So I'm just moving forward again. Again, I put ocean paint now on the upper right corner and using that same Mighty Wave stencil. I'm just continuing to remove paint. And this is Marine. And the dollop stencil. Now I will say when I'm layering my stencils in this, I am making sure that I'm overlapping areas. So for example, the umber went in the bottom two corners and then the ocean you can see went over the top of it. And the marine is overlapping both the umber and the ocean. So I'm being sure in this layering process that I am creating layers. I'm layering on top of each other. Some of the original umber stenciling is getting covered by this marine. And I'm okay with it because I'm creating depth and creating layers. So do I lose some of my original work? Yes. Can you see some of the book paper? At this point, not a whole lot. Am I okay with it? Yeah, I am, because it's part of my creative process, and maybe I wouldn't have got to this point if I hadn't put down that first original layer. So I just want to say, embrace the layers, embrace covering up portions of things. It is okay. And also, you do see some of that book paper when I'm doing this reverse stenciling technique, because when I wipe it away, you can see that book paper. Now I'm going to traditional stenciling using a mini blending tool, and I'm putting sky down using that same Mighty Wave stencil. And then I'm also using the dollop stencil that we used before with the same color, sky. And now I'm using sand. Yeah, sand. It isn't completely sand because I used the dirty blending tool, so it's a mixture of sand and sky together to create this dusky blue color. And then I'm doing some final stenciling with the tornado stencil and ancient. Yeah, ancient. So there's a little bit of metallic sparkle in there now as well. So I started to think maybe the stenciling got a little too crazy and I lost all my white. So I'm just going in and lightly brushing again with gesso to kind of get some of that white space back. So I created chaos with my stencils, and now I'm kind of reining it back in with the gesso and editing my stenciling a little bit. So the gesso doesn't completely cover it up, but it does create areas of rest for your eye instead of just being all that stenciling all the time. And then after I'm looking at this, I decided, well, now you covered up all the stenciling, you did too much gesso. So I went in with the linking pattern stencil, and I am removing some of that gesso with the baby wipe. Now, because the stencil I chose has a really dense pattern, it is going to show more of the pattern than if I say just use like something larger like the dollop stencil we did earlier. But because it is so dense, it is also leaving a lot of that white space in there from that we did want from the gesso. So this I felt was a happy compromise to not cover up all my stenciling, but also give that relief for your eye with the white space. And I'm not removing all of the gesso, so you will still see some of those brush strokes that we added in, especially around the lighthouse. So I decided that because I was trying to create that coastal feel with the lighthouse imagery, I wanted to have some of that wood grain rice paper added back in. So I just tore up some more pieces and I'm just gluing them down. So now after that gel medium and the rice paper has had a chance to dry, I'm going in with the Distress crayon in crushed olive, and I'm applying it directly to the page right out from the crayon. And I'm creating a layer moving left to right, and it's not perfectly in a line. Some of it's jagged, sort of going in with that coastal wood feel. And then when I put it on the page, I'm smudging out with my finger, so I get some areas that are a little darker, some that are a little lighter, and I'm creating an area that I can layer my next elements on. So these are metal brads, and I didn't really want to cut a hole in my paper, so I'm using my Tim Holtz mini snips, and I'm just snipping off the metal on the back that would create the brad. So now it's just a flat metal embellishment. And then I'm going to use some foam tape to adhere that down so it's a little bit raised. I'm also using a piece of chipboard from the Jessalou Exploration Collection, and I'm going to glue that down with some collage medium. I also edged this chipboard piece with some archival ink so it didn't have a raw edge. Now it has a nice black edge. And I'm going to place that down just directly below and slightly to the right of the lighthouse. So as I mentioned before, I had a piece of foam tape, so I adhered that to the back of the brad, and then I was concerned that it wasn't going to be quite enough adhesive, so I also just squeezed a little bit of the Distress Collage medium onto the back of that, and then I'm placing it down. And I'm just pushing really firmly, and then I'm going to let that dry. Now, because there's foam tape on there, it is slightly raised above that chipboard. You may not be able to see that in the picture. So now with the palette knife, I'm placing down some Distress Grit Paste, and this is the translucent version. So this, when it dries, it will be clear, but the thicker you put it on, it does kind of have a slight creamy color to it, but it is mostly clear. But they call it translucent because depending on how thick, it may not be perfectly clear. On this page, I'm not putting it on too thick, so you are just going to see a very clear, translucent, sandy, gritty texture around the outside of my chipboard adventure quote. Now, when you put it on, it does look white, but that, again, when it dries, it will be a translucent, clear, textured area. And then I decided I need to add some highlights to my lighthouse and kind of pull that from the background. So I'm going in with my Stabilo All pencil in black, and I'm just tracing along the outside of the lighthouse. I'm also using the Stabilo All pencil to trace around the outside of the adventure chipboard quote, being careful not to get it into the grit paste. And then I'm just hitting that with a little bit of water because this is a water reactive pencil. It'll cause the Stabilo All to move slightly, and I'm also doing that on top of the lighthouse. Thank you so much for watching and creating with me. I hope you were inspired by this page today. And if you'd like to learn how you can be a part of the Mixed Media Inspired subscription and get fun and exciting products delivered to your door every month, check out the description. I'll put links to the information there. Have a wonderful day.